Welcome back to my channel. Hey everyone! When Emily first arrived in the small, quiet town tucked between rolling hills and winding country roads, it felt like the world had pressed pause. The air was softer there, filled with the scent of rain and distant pine, but her heart still carried the noise of the city she left behind, the honking cars, the endless chatter, and most of all, the memories of her parents. They had been her compass, her laughter, her sense of belonging. Without them, even the brightest morning sun seemed dimmer. She rented a small cottage on the edge of town, where the wind whispered through the trees and the nights were so silent she could hear her own heartbeat echo through the stillness. The people were kind but distant. They smiled politely when she passed by, their warmth cautious, as though they sensed the weight of her grief. Emily would sit by her window every evening, sipping tea she hardly tasted, watching the world go on around her. Children ran past her garden gate chasing each other, laughter bursting like music she couldn't quite join in. Inside, she wondered if she'd ever belong again, if her heart, cracked but still beating, could find a rhythm in this new life. There were moments she tried to convince herself that this was simply a new chapter. She painted her walls, planted daisies by her porch, and filled the empty rooms with second-hand furniture and the scent of fresh linen. But even then, the silence lingered. It was a kind of loneliness that didn't scream, it whispered, softly and endlessly, like a song she couldn't turn off. She missed the sound of her mother humming in the kitchen, her father calling her name with gentle pride. Every corner of that little house became a mirror, reflecting what she had lost and what she feared she might never find again: connection. Still, there was something about the town that began to stir her heart in ways she couldn't explain. Maybe it was the rhythm of the mornings, the way sunlight spilled across her porch as if inviting her to step outside. Maybe it was the small acts of kindness she started to notice. The baker who slipped her an extra muffin, the neighbor who waved from across the fence, the little girl who left wildflowers on her doorstep with a shy smile. These tiny moments stitched a faint thread of comfort through her loneliness. She began to walk through the town square on weekends, exploring the market, watching families move together in quiet harmony. There, among strangers, she felt the first flicker of something she hadn't dared to feel in months: hope. Emily didn't know it yet, but this quiet town, this place she had chosen to heal in solitude, was preparing her for something unexpected. It wasn't just a stop along the way. It was where her heart would learn to open again, where love would find her when she least expected it. And in that stillness, beneath the hush of her grief, a new story was quietly beginning. It happened on a quiet Sunday morning, one of those days when the world seems to move a little slower, when the sun spills gently across the cobblestone streets and even the air feels kinder. Emily had gone to the local park with a book she hadn't truly been reading, simply searching for company in the sounds of life around her, the distant chatter, the laughter of children, the rustle of leaves above. She sat beneath an old oak tree, lost in thought, when a small ball rolled to her feet. She looked up, startled, and saw a little girl standing a few feet away, her brown curls bouncing in the breeze, her eyes wide and apologetic. Before Emily could react, a man hurried toward them, his expression caught between concern and amusement. "I'm so sorry," he said with a warm smile. "Lily tends to forget the concept of boundaries when she's having fun." His voice was calm, steady, and there was a kindness in his eyes that made her feel, for the first time in months, at ease. Emily handed the ball back to the little girl, who grinned up at her. "Thank you, miss," she said, her voice small but bright, and ran off again with the boundless energy only children seem to have. Daniel stayed behind for a moment, watching his daughter play, then glanced back at Emily. They talked, first about small things, the weather, the beauty of the park, the way autumn had begun to paint the trees in gold and amber. But as their conversation went on, something unspoken passed between them, a quiet understanding that both carried the weight of loss and the courage to keep moving forward. Emily learned that Daniel had lost his wife 2 years earlier. He spoke of it not with bitterness, but with a tenderness that revealed how deeply he had loved and how hard he had fought to rebuild a life for his little girl. Something in his words resonated with Emily. She saw in him a reflection of her own loneliness, but also a strength she admired. And in Lily, she saw the child she once was, hopeful, trusting, and full of wonder even after heartbreak. The three of them spent the morning together, watching ducks on the pond, sharing small laughter that felt effortless, like a melody that had always been waiting for harmony. As the day drew to an end, Daniel invited her to join them again sometime, perhaps for coffee or a walk by the lake. Emily hesitated at first, afraid to open the door to something new, but something in his voice, something genuine, made her say yes. It wasn't the kind of yes that promised anything grand. It was quiet, uncertain, but full of possibility. When they parted ways that afternoon, Emily walked home with a lightness in her step she hadn't felt in so long. The world around her seemed brighter, the silence of her little cottage somehow softer. She didn't yet know it, but that simple encounter, the smile of a child, the kindness of a stranger, had just changed the course of her life forever. As the days turned into weeks, Emily found herself seeing Daniel and Lily more often. What began as a polite acquaintance, a few words exchanged in the parks, slowly grew into a gentle rhythm that brought warmth back into her days. Sometimes they would meet by chance at the local cafe or by the flower stalls at the market, and each time their conversations lasted a little longer. There was something deeply comforting in the way Daniel spoke. Steady, sincere, never hurried. He asked questions that made her feel seen, and he listened with a patience that made her believe her words mattered. One evening, after a light drizzle had left the streets glistening, Daniel invited her to join them for dinner. Nothing fancy, he said with a shy smile, just spaghetti and a little chaos. Emily hesitated, but Lily's bright eyes were too convincing to resist. So she went, and in that small, warmly lit kitchen, something shifted. The air was filled with the scent of garlic and laughter. Lily sat at the table, proudly setting mismatched plates, while Daniel tried to keep the sauce from burning. It was messy, imperfect, but it felt alive, so full of simple human joy that Emily couldn't help but laugh until her cheeks ached. Over time, their dinners became a quiet tradition. Some nights they cooked together, other nights they simply ordered takeout and talked for hours. Daniel would tell stories about Lily's endless curiosity, how she once tried to plant candy in the garden to grow a sweet tree. Emily shared memories of her parents, not with sorrow, but with a softness that came from healing. Each word, each shared story became a thread weaving their lives closer together. Lily, with her innocent heart, was the bridge between them. She would reach for Emily's hand without hesitation, pulling her into games or insisting she stay for dessert. Emily, in turn, found herself teaching Lily small things: how to bake cookies, how to draw daisies on napkins, how to fold paper hearts. These tiny moments, ordinary to anyone else, became the heartbeat of her new life. There were times when silence filled the room, but it no longer felt empty. It was the kind of silence that spoke of comfort and belonging, the kind that exists only when words are no longer needed. Daniel would glance at Emily, and she'd find herself smiling for no reason at all. There was something between them, unspoken, fragile, but undeniably real. Emily began to realize that love doesn't always return with thunder or fanfare. Sometimes it arrives quietly, disguised as friendship, laughter, and the warmth of shared meals. It sneaks into the ordinary until one day you notice your heart feels full again. And as the nights grew longer and the laughter louder, Emily understood that her one, empty home had found its music again, and this time it was made of love. As winter settled over the town, the air grew colder, and so did the spaces between words that once came easily. Emily and Daniel still spent time together. Dinners, walks through the park, evenings where Lily would fall asleep on the couch while they talked quietly by the fire. But something unspoken lingered in the room. It was gentle yet heavy, like the hush before a confession. They both felt it, that subtle pull toward each other, but neither dared to cross the invisible line that kept them safe. Daniel would sometimes catch himself watching her, the way her eyes softened when she laughed, or how she absent-mindedly tucked her hair behind her ear when she was deep in thought. In those small moments, he saw a tenderness he hadn't known he was still capable of feeling. But love, after loss, is never simple. He had built his life around protecting Lily and keeping his heart steady. The idea of opening it again, of risking pain or disappointment, felt like stepping into an unknown storm. Emily, too, felt that quiet ache whenever he smiled. There were times she wanted to reach out, to tell him that he had helped her find herself again, that he had made her believe life could be beautiful after grief. But words, no matter how sincere, can feel fragile when fear sits between two hearts. She worried that speaking her feelings aloud might break the delicate peace they had found. So she stayed silent, letting her affection bloom quietly, hidden beneath small gestures, an extra dish she baked for dinner, a scarf she knitted for Lily, a note she left by the door thanking him for the evening. Their closeness became a dance of hesitation. They both sensed the shift, the lingering glances, the pauses in conversation, the moments when laughter softened into something almost sacred, yet neither moved closer. Perhaps it was because they both understood too well what it meant to lose someone you love. They carried scars that made them cautious, hearts that needed gentleness more than passion, and yet, even in that restraint, there was beauty. It wasn't the kind of love that demanded or rushed. It was patient, almost reverent. They found comfort in knowing that love could exist in silence, that it didn't need to be named to be real. Sometimes, as they sat together watching the fire crackle, Emily would think to herself how strange it was that two people could feel so much and say so little, but maybe love, in its truest form, didn't always need words. Maybe it was enough to simply be there, to share the same space, the same warmth, the same unspoken longing, and in that fragile stillness between them, love waited, soft, quiet, and certain, like a secret the heart already knew. It was late February when the first signs appeared. Lily, who was usually full of light and laughter, grew quiet and pale. Her voice lost its usual sparkle, and her energy faded like the last flicker of a candle. Daniel thought it was just a cold at first, something small, something that would pass. But when her fever climbed and her little hands trembled with exhaustion, fear began to settle deep in his chest. He called the doctor, paced the floors, and did everything he could, yet nothing seemed to calm the ache of helplessness that filled the house. When Emily heard, she came without hesitation. There was no question in her mind, no pause to consider what was proper or expected. She simply arrived, her coat still wet from the rain, her eyes filled with concern. From that moment on she stayed. She brought warm soup, cool cloths, and quiet strength. While Daniel worried, she moved through the home with calm precision, tending to Lily's fever, reading softly to her when sleep wouldn't come, whispering gentle promises that everything would be all right. In those long nights, when the wind howled outside and the world seemed far away, Emily became the steady presence that held them together. Daniel watched her with quiet awe, the way she brushed Lily's hair from her forehead, the way her voice seemed to soothe the air itself. He realized then that love wasn't something you declared. It was something you showed in the moments that mattered most. Emily wasn't family by name or blood, yet she loved Lily as though she were her own. There was one night in particular that stayed with him. Lily had been restless, her fever stubborn, and exhaustion shadowed every line of his face. He sat at her bedside, his hand in hers, when Emily came to sit beside him. She didn't speak, she just placed her hand gently over his. In that touch there was understanding, strength, and something far deeper than comfort. It was love, quiet, unconditional, and real. When the fever finally broke days later and Lily began to smile again, the whole house seemed to exhale. Daniel stood in the kitchen that morning, watching Emily pour a cup of tea, and he felt something shift inside him. The fear that had kept him guarded began to loosen. The walls he had built around his heart started to fall away. He saw with perfect clarity that Emily wasn't just someone passing through their lives. She was a part of it now, woven into their days, their laughter, their hope. For Emily, the moment was just as profound. As she held Lily close, she felt something she hadn't felt since losing her parents, a sense of belonging, of being needed, of being home. And in that tender stillness, they both understood that love doesn't ask where you come from. It simply asks that you stay. Spring arrived softly that year, carrying with it the scent of new beginnings. The snow melted from the rooftops, the trees began to bloom again, and the little town came back to life with color and song. For Emily, the season felt different this time, warmer, brighter, filled with a quiet joy she hadn't known in years. The house that once echoed with silence now hummed with laughter and the sound of footsteps running down the hall. It was no longer just Daniel's home or Lily's safe place, it had become theirs. Mornings began with small moments of peace, Daniel brewing coffee while Emily helped Lily pack her school bag. The three of them gathered around the kitchen table as sunlight poured through the window. There was something beautifully ordinary about it, something that made Emily's heart ache in the best possible way. Love had crept into her life not as a grand gesture, but as 1,000 small moments stitched together, each one tender, genuine, and real. Daniel noticed it too. He saw how Emily fit into their world so naturally, how she laughed with Lily, how she listened when he spoke, how her presence seemed to calm the noise in his mind. There was no single moment when he decided he loved her. It simply became the truth, as natural as breathing. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching Lily chase fireflies, he turned to Emily and said quietly, "You've changed everything." And she smiled, not needing him to say more, because she felt it too. They never tried to replace what was lost, his wife, her parents, because love doesn't erase what came before, it builds upon it. Together, they created something new, something whole. Emily learned that family wasn't about shared names or bloodlines. It was about showing up, about choosing each other every single day. She found comfort in Lily's laughter, strength in Daniel's kindness, and peace in the rhythm of their simple days together. There were still moments of uncertainty, of course. Life never becomes perfect simply because love arrives. But now, when the storms came, they faced them together. They understood that love wasn't about avoiding pain. It was about having someone to hold your hand through it. And in that understanding, they found a kind of happiness that was honest and lasting. Years later, when neighbors spoke of them, they often said how natural it seemed, as though Emily had always been a part of their family. Perhaps in some way, she always had been waiting for them just as they had been waiting for her. And so, through quiet courage and open hearts, they built something rare and beautiful, a life stitched together with love, patience, and trust. Thank you so much for watching and sharing this journey with me. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and consider subscribing for more stories from the heart. See you next time.